Yeah, I'm just gonna move this over into the corner over here, and I'll come back for that later. No point in beating around the bush here. Most of us know what this episode is, and seriously, these vague intros are completely pointless when I list the game's title right in the opening. You know I'm looking at ArcheAge. Hell, I already looked at it in a side quest and gave some thoughts there. There was one common theme in the comments, besides the usual, in which many players assured me that my issues with the game could be alleviated with a good guild, but I wasn't sure I was going to find one in the crowd that I was currently seeing. So what better player base to get into the game with than my show's own viewer base? We have a raid call and a semi-universal guild name, so let's just put this theory to the test, shall we? That's why this episode is a bit more unique. See, I have a tier on my Patreon called Beta Tester, where any patron of that level or above gets access to what games I'm playing in the future, and they can even watch and interact live with the scripting process, adding their own observations and commenting on my views before the episode even airs. But I decided for this episode, instead of just leaving it to those few patrons, I would allow anyone in the MMO Grinder community to join us on this adventure, and gain those beta tester level perks. This means this episode doesn't contain merely my thoughts on the title, but the collective thoughts of everyone in the community of Grindstone. If you're just finding out about this now and are sad that you've missed it, well, you really ought to pay attention to my show more often. Let's just get all formalities out of the way then. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at ArcheAge. ArcheAge. No one really seems fully decided on how they want to pronounce it. I'll probably just jump around with pronunciations. ArcheAge is a prototypical fantasy MMO with a dash of steampunk and East Asian aesthetics. While the story and elements, such as two-faction combat, seem the most cookie-cutter out of the game's features, the game takes a more open approach to MMOs by allowing players to disband from their faction entirely, to become pirates, change up their class combinations, run supply trades, and own their own territory, beyond simply just following the quest lines. ArcheAge is brought to the US by Trion, developers of Rift and Defiance. However, ArcheAge is developed by Korean developer XL Games, and ArcheAge has very little in common with Trion's other fare. After a few months in a restricted closed beta, and a few weeks in open beta, ArcheAge officially launched last month. After a very tumultuous launch, choking the servers with hour-long queues or more, the game quickly got to a more manageable state, and we were able to start gaining a presence on the Enoch server. Since this was a community event involving many members of MMO Grinder, I'll be doing a lot of speaking as a group, like using the word we rather than I, as much of this script arose from group consensus. Let's begin. Save for the occasional usage of low-resolution megatextures for cliff faces, or to just fill in the world, you'll generally see good textures and model work throughout the game. The one downside is that the world feels really empty and barren, and it could have easily been filled in to flesh out the environment more. Outside of the empty feeling of the world, there seems to have been a confusing mashup of biomes, seemingly more to have variety than to make any logical sense. Perhaps the most egregious example of this is a small bridge covering a river that you can practically jump across that separates a harsh desert wasteland from a bountiful grassland with dense forests. This game suffers slightly from a lack of imagination in its setting. Starting areas for all races rarely travel into the realm of wonder. For a world with magic and goddesses, most places are generic forests and deserts. This does improve on occasion. For instance, one area is covered in giant pine cones that massive bees have taken up as their hives. There's also an area of dense fog and haze over the lava-soaked volcanic landscape of Cinderstone. The Hranya continent offers a gorgeous landscape, but if you prefer massive floating castles or caves made out of crystal, other such fantastical elements, you won't see much of that here. There are also enough cases of people falling through the world to discover the secret oceans that lie beneath, that it warrants mentioning that graphical bugs can be very common. If you begin seeing nothing but geometric shapes or character models distorting a jagged mess of mesh, don't fret, as you aren't the only one. Crashes, sudden disconnects, and instances of the game freezing in place are quite common, and the gods will often banish you from the world if the server experiences too much load. One would take special note of the lighting system, which is completely dynamic, even allowing rays of light to peer through pieces of armor or weapons you might have on your character, and casting ever-elongating shadows as the sun sets and rises. The game also has a weather system and a day-night cycle that can affect the items that you gather from your trees and farms, and it serves as more than just a way to show off the graphics. Given the general usage of shadow fog and other MMOs, it's interesting to see such a fully implemented lighting system. The lighting also plays off the very flashy attack animations. Even your basic slashing attacks from various weapons leave sweeping trails and distortions as they swing through the air. Fire magic leaves a flaming trail behind it. Ice forms crystals on its targets that will break off and fall to the ground. This can lead to battles becoming a bit of a special effects spam fest, making it difficult to keep track of enemy players who act as a constant threat. Character models, which can be easily customized except for the body for some reason, look pretty good, especially for an MMO with large battles, and having relatively few hits to PC performance. Weapon and armor models also have good texture work, allowing for some intricate details along the handguards, grips, pommels, and the blades of the swords, and fine patterns along pieces of armor and shields. Though plate and cloth seem to benefit from this the most, while leather just generally has that stitched together feel. When it comes to enemy design, we get a few hit and misses here. You'll have plenty of human bandits, pirates, and raiders with varying palette swaps and model changes that get very tedious. There are very few distinct designs. You'll have plenty of human bandits, pirates, and raiders with varying palette swaps and model reskins, and it gets very tedious. There are very few distinct designs though, such as the sea bugs, the metallic sharks, and bipedal mosquitoes and dinosaurs. But a general theme of humanoid were-monsters pops up frequently. The game's animations can also be hit and miss. You'll notice frequent jarring breaks between animations as one overwrites the other. For the few animations that have long or complicated movements, you might notice bits of stutter and a general otherworldly feeling to your actions. As for the game's user interface and presentation, the best word that comes to mind is just cluttered. Maps and other windows will constantly overlap one another and obstruct your view, not to mention sometimes being outright inaccurate. There are also far too many indicators cluttering the maps, making it nigh impossible to find one merchant or thing that you need in the sea of icons and overlays without going through drop-down menus to disable everything. There are minor aspects of the interface that can be tweaked and changed around, but not enough to be considered customizable. For instance, the button to make the minimap smaller or larger is easily missed in the upper right corner. All told, the game's aesthetics do the job, but they aren't anything to get too excited about. Music in this game is rather difficult to talk about. It's one of those situations where it depends entirely on the song and the context. While the soundtrack is decent outside of the game, and certain tracks are absolutely fantastic to listen to, you're far more likely to hear repetitive looping tracks and others with a slow build-up, making the mundane, soul-crushing grind of questing and trade runs a march of attrition. A major issue with this is that the music tends to reset itself when entering towns, starting battles or initiating other events, causing you to hear the smallest portions of the same tracks repeatedly. Special mention should be given to the songs Happy Village and Soulsreed Peninsula, which contain such repetitive and obnoxious tones that the majority of our guild was forced to shut off the music after several assaults. The phrase "bring your own soundtrack" could not be more appropriate. Sound design ranges from passable to great. Swords sound like swords, arrows have a satisfying thud on impact, and lightning is the usual crackle. In general, the sounds of combat and cannon fire are done very well, giving a genuine moment of tension when you hear the thunderous roar of cannons accompanying a pirate raid. The sounds of other things that will attempt to add ambience either clash with the environment that they're presented in, or are just completely non-existent. Woe be to you for the first time the silent tornado of death strikes. There's a lot of voice acting within the game, some of it in English and most of it for major cutscenes and stories, while the remainder of it is in Korean when you simply interact or walk near NPCs and overhear conversations. It's an odd juxtaposition to say the least. Trion is recently pushing their own totally not Steam launcher called Glyph with this game, but the game is still available to play on Steam, though many have reported problems with it. I'll give Glyph major credit, as I've only had to log in with that instead of the former problem of having to deal with the authenticator and coin locks of Rift every time I play a game. The game starts with 4 races, composing 2 separate and warring factions, who are only at war because they are butthurt at each other, and that isn't even an exaggeration. The 2 factions have distinct visual styles, with personal preference going to the Eastern Asian faction for its world design and general Asian themes, while the Western faction just has a very generic fantasy aesthetic. Each race also gets a specific racial buff to fit its lore. Nuians get a 10% stat boost in combat for 10 minutes when they die, and have the ability to construct houses and castles even faster. Elves get to hold their breath underwater for 20 seconds longer, and can swim 5% faster. Firin, the cat-like race, gain the ability to climb 30% faster and take 20% reduced falling damage, and the Harani reduces the cooldown and cast time of the recall ability by 30% and increases logging and gathering speed by 10%. Once you finish creating your character, you'll be given a choice of a few starting skill sets to use. Once you hit level 10, you'll get your third and final skill set. After selecting your third class, you'll be given a title seemingly randomly chosen that represents your choices. Seriously, choosing a healing class with a fast melee subclass gets you labeled as an assassin, because as we all know, assassins are well known for their healing skills. This brings the total number of classes to 120, though roughly only 11 of them are actually useful, and the remaining 109 will see you getting completely destroyed for being non-optimal. We all wondered why this system was implemented in this way, and not something similar to the Secret World skill wheel, which allows you to fully customize your build with the various abilities from each subclass. So many of the combinations and the skills contained within them are so completely worthless that it would have been preferable for the game to just have some form of locked classes from the get-go. It also seems completely impossible to be a healer in this game, with large heals having very long cooldown timers for little impact, and quick heals barely even registering on someone's health bar. Fortunately for those who attempted this, you can change your skill set at any time by going to a Nui Priestess or a skill manager. But be warned that anything you change will be set to level 10 by default, or whatever you last left it at, and must be leveled up separately. This isn't made any easier by being a higher level, as you'll be completely underpowered compared to those who've never changed. The gameplay itself is exceptionally easy and yet tediously drawn out to the point where combat will wear thin on you quickly. It's easy to just zone out and operate completely on autopilot, meandering through quests and kills with little thought to tactics or movement. I ended up as a sorcerer remaining Arcanist, and only ever bothered to use 3 skills out of my 12 available at the time, as they were the quickest and most effective way to victory. Speaking of skills, when fighting groups of enemies, even those close to your level will quickly see you overwhelmed and slaughtered, as very few classes have reliable and consistent AoE damage abilities. Fighting one enemy at a time will rapidly send you in a combat-induced haze, again, tedious and easy. If you do end up getting taken down, however, you'll lose a portion of your experience, and you can gain most of it back by praying at the Nui Shrine for a decent cost of labor points. If you fall to a player, this penalty will not be applied, and if a player revives you instead of you traveling to a statue, you'll gain back the XP that you'd normally have been forced to spend your precious few labor points on. To aid you in traversing the lands of ArcheAge, you'll be given a racial mount early in the storyline, giving a welcome break from the seemingly endless running you have to do up to that point. You'll also receive a battle pet around level 25, which can assist you in combat, provided you first understand that battle pet formula means milk the cows you find in the nearby corral. This is most likely where you'll first realize that you can only have one type of pet, mount, or cart summoned at a time, but thankfully you can summon one boat as well if you want to keep your mount active on a sea voyage. If you want to return to any area you've previously visited, you can use your recall spell to teleport to your last saved recall point, often established by interacting with a floating tome in or near the various inns. Or you can use your teleportation book with a Hereafter Stone, craftable at the Stonecutter's Bench, to open a portal that anyone, including enemy players, can jump into to reach your chosen destination. Later on, you'll also be given a glider which you can use to quickly get around the map by jumping from one high vantage point to another, if you're a skilled enough pilot. At level 20, you can even go to Mirage Isle, the game's in-universe cash shop island, to buy blueprints to upgrade your glider so it doesn't move at a snail's pace. The glider can also be used at any time, and barring the rough sea winds that make the glider more of a detriment to use, the glider can be a good way to climb mountains or cross over contested areas from high above. This is one of the few MMOs where we've heard players actually exclaim, "Oh god, there are more quests to do." Rather than breaking up the grind, the quests of ArcheAge are generally uninspired, comically inept, or outright broken. It also doesn't help that the story is painfully slow, even becoming laughable when it's finally revealed that a group of enemies that you've already been killing, for hours on end, turned out to be the bad guys all along. Yeah, I thought that's why we were killing them before. Is this game implying that we were killing them because we were bored? Getting back to the standard quest system, the tone and pacing is completely random. You'll spend one quest murdering dozens of pirates, raiders, and traders, and the next searching for potatoes in someone's garden. This is to say nothing of the huge tonal shift where you have to kill poor people for being poor, or perform science experiments on sentient beings by throwing various vials of acid at them to then collect their bones, before you then go pick some nice flowers to go with the stew for the troops. To say this game's morality compass is broken would be an understatement if it weren't already non-existent, thanks to the two factions still choosing to fight each other even after the apocalypse because they don't want their feelings hurt. If you want to do anything other than combat, you'll need labor points, accruing at a rather slow 5 labor points for 5 minutes of gameplay for free players, and a slightly less terrible 10 labor points for the same time, if you subscribe. It wouldn't be so bad if basic things didn't require 10 to 100 labor points to perform. This is also where the largest divide between free-to-play and patrons come in, as patron members continue to gain labor points while offline through the rate of 5 for 5, while free players get absolutely nothing. And you wondered why there's so many bots keeping players logged in. Keep in mind, this is the labor system 2.0 that was implemented by Trion. The original Korean release was 1 labor for 5 minutes for free players, and 5 for a patron with 1 labor point for patrons while offline. A Korean grinder in every sense of the word. Thankfully, there is a second remedy for this, as paying players can spend money to buy labor point potions, known as workers' compensation, and put them on the auction house for free players to buy. These potions give 1,000 labor points instantly, with a 12-hour cooldown before using a second potion. Those labor points can be used in the crafting and farming aspects of the game, which make up the overwhelming majority of what this game has to offer. With these systems, you can plant seeds, saplings, or technically even livestock, and help cultivate each until they're ready to be harvested. A note should be made here that you can use specialty farms that allow you to keep your crops safe in public for a time. However, you can also take the risk of planting in the open world and pray that someone doesn't come along and uproot them at a small penalty of infamy. It should also be noted that trees that don't produce some sort of edible food can only be placed in the wilds or on personal property. Said personal property can only be acquired by patron subscribers with the tax system implemented, while free players have to make do with their public farms or out in the wilderness. It also isn't uncommon to see many clumps of houses jammed together that navigating certain areas can feel like a chore, even having roads blocked off by someone's house. And once enough structures, animals, and decorations are loaded into a single area, you'll be noticing some serious slowdown and slow rendering. To make your own house, assuming you have patron status, proceed to Mirage Isle and use your Gilda Stars to buy the basic blueprint of the house that you desire. You can purchase either houses from your own faction or the enemy faction and can enter a model of each type at Mirage Isle. Once you have your blueprint, you can return to the main world and either place your house in designated housing plots, which vary from anything goes to only allowing specific blueprint styles, or risk placing it in the wilderness where it's most likely to get raided. You'll then use the blueprint to place the base outline of your home, and once happy with the position and rotation, accepting the selection will spawn a starting platform. From here, simply gather the requested materials in the order they appear and use your labor points to complete each stage of the build until your house fully materializes. Houses can then be filled with purely decorative items that you can craft yourself, earn through some quests, or find as random drops throughout the world. Some of these are items that will grant you actual buff towards your professions. Certain tables will grant buffs to armor crafting and woodworking. A furnace can improve your smelting and metalworking abilities, and beds can even give you a quick buff to your labor points, assuming you don't mind the well-rested debuff to prevent spamming of this method. You'll also have the ability to place various gatherable items around your home, acting as a safe barrier against would-be thieves so long as you have the tax certificates to pay your upkeep. You'll need labor points to craft anything, and while the crafting system at first seems varied and unique, you'll quickly discover the odd and completely arbitrary reliance on lesser crafted items to produce higher quality items. For example, if you want to make a high-level healing potion because the quest began to stop awarding them, you need to first craft the beginner potions, then the level 10, then the 20, the 30, the 40, and finally the 50, not to mention also having enough proficiency to actually complete each step in that chain. Really, it just adds another grind wall on top of the grind that you go through while actually playing the game. To get around this, you'll find players abandoning the standard farming systems to instead buy everything they need from the auction house and avoid the sheer tedium. With all that, the game doesn't really begin until you hit level 30. Yeah, I know I've been vehemently against using the phrase, you need to play this until level blank to understand it, but the change in tone and playstyle is practically a flip of the switch. Everything beforehand is done within a completely safe system, allowing you to simply quest and mind your own business, barring the occasional bot army, and everything after 30 is a quest in pain and frustration, not only because the experience gains hit a brick wall, but because every player, friendly or otherwise, can now openly kill you. It's an odd design choice to allow both open faction-based PvP, and letting your fellow faction members outright murder you with little more of a punishment than a stern "don't do it again, mister." In all honesty, the system encourages and outright rewards endgame level players of either faction to murder lower level players of the opposite faction starting from level 30 onwards to get better gear and money. This is compounded by the fact that you aren't punished for fighting people below your level, which encourages you to horribly murder someone that'll stand no chance against you and give you a quick, easy victory. Hell, even Blizzard figured out that was a bad idea over a decade ago. This can also give other players, enemy or not, the chance to steal the ever-lucrative trade packs, which can earn you up to 12 gold just for turning it in. So carrying around said packs makes you feel like a lost tourist carrying a Louis Vuitton handbag through the armed robbery convention. Should the player continue to murder their own faction, or steal enough to accrue 3,000 infamy, they'll be immediately ejected from their faction and be forced to join the pirate faction. This is actually such a non-punishment that people are actively seeking to join this faction. So those trade packs I mentioned earlier, they're part of this game's oddly implemented trade system, which, while complex, becomes an exercise in sanity-straining levels of boredom. Each trade run, even ones that should be a simple jog to a neighboring zone, take upwards of 30 minutes to complete. And while this is good for your labor point regeneration, it doesn't lead to any kind of engrossing or memorable gameplay. Everything weighs the same when you put it in a trade pack, regardless of its content. Meaning 15 dyed feathers will weigh the same as 100 bars of iron and take just as long to deliver. You can speed this process along by getting a donkey, but the only way to get said donkey is to perform 2 long trade runs by walking and riding carriages. Oh, yeah, that video that's been running in the corner of the screen, that's the trade run I just spoke of. It's been running this entire time. To start a trade run, simply acquire the items the zone needs to craft their specialty goods, such as dried food for Salsreed and dyed goose feathers for Gwynedd, and then purchase a quality certificate for 50 silver at any general merchant. Once you have all that, simply locate the specialty workbench of the zone that you wish to craft your pack in, and select the specific pack from the drop-down menu. After you finish crafting it, you'll receive the pack instantly, unequipping your glider from your back slot, and be given the Overburden debuff. Note that you can't sell the item you crafted in the host region you crafted it in, and you're only likely to see any noticeable monetary return for making long-distance trade runs. You'll quickly realize just how long of a trip you're in for. Once you feel you have the hang of the trade system, you can use the Guild Stars received from the story and daily quests to purchase blueprints to begin crafting your own ship. This will require resources to place down the initial dock, as well as an investment of gold before you can even begin to start crafting the trade packs to then deliver to the dock, one by one, in requested order, before you can actually begin constructing the ship itself. While the system is far more detailed and realistic than most MMOs, the time investment required to complete it adds yet another layer of tedium to the proceedings. Ships, however, can actually help remove some of the more boring aspects of trade runs by allowing you to use ocean routes at a faster pace than even a donkey could muster. However, this also tends to make you an even larger target, as people tend not to use their ships unless they're making long trade runs, and your boat coming into shore? Well, remember that lost tourist comment? Imagine that, only now you're riding on a massive billboard that reads, "I have a shit ton of money and move at the pace of a frozen snail." You'll quickly understand why the shorelines are drenched in players' blood. Unless you plan on packing some serious backup or know a sneaky way to get yourself from your ship to the gold trader, be prepared to be jumped by everyone and their mother looking to make some easy gold. What's nice about trade runs, the ship system and the game in general, is that it's a game with a massive, open, continuous world. Rarely do I see a game nowadays, hell, not since World of Warcraft, wherein going to the next zone means you just simply walk toward it, and not having to find a specific chosen portal on the edge of the map that'll instantly port you there. This allows players to get more clever in their trade runs once they learn the lay of the land and sea. The game suffers from some general design inelegance that should never have made it out of the alpha testing phase. Simple mistakes like being able to click on out-of-range items and NPCs but not interact with them, unless you're in their varied and arbitrary range. Quests open and close quickly when you're close enough to the NPC to click them, but not close enough for it to count. Characters can get shoved around by others and move them out of this range. Pets and players can accidentally or purposefully block doorways. Your character can get trapped in certain parts of the geometry. Enemies can get a foot clipped into a slight incline and inexplicably become immune to all damage, despite being effortlessly able to attack and damage you. Players can pick up some quest items from quests that they're not on and ruin it for the other players on the quest. Some enemies respawn way too fast or all at once, while others won't appear until 20 minutes later. One area boss had Nate and I give up on waiting for it, as we were stuck watching a mass of players gather at its spawn point, and due to the honestly outdated tagging system, we were pretty much forced to wait if no one was willing to form a party. The weather system mentioned in graphics actually has an impact on gameplay, even affecting your various gathering professions. One of the bonuses granted by weather is an incredibly rare log that you can only get while a tree is growing, gets struck by lightning in a thunderstorm, and then chars itself in the correct manner to drop said log. Considering this log is a vital component to the highly desirable farm cart vehicle, they tend to go for exorbitant amounts of money on the auction house, starting at 250 gold. That's a lot of trade runs. The weather can also affect your ships at sea, slowing them down when in heavy storms, and even prevent you from using your glider without being flipped around and slammed into the ocean's surface. The sad part about this is that the weather system isn't used more often, and while you may see the occasional tornado or freak storm out at sea, they're almost completely ignorable due to their rarity. What can't be ignored completely is the day-night system, which oddly is tied to the completion and progress of certain quests, either requiring you to be present at key parts of the day to perform an event, or just talk to NPCs and kill mobs at night. What can be ignored is the dungeon system, so anemic and minimal that I honestly forgot about it after a few days. The game isn't really known for its PvE content. While it seems that dungeons do try to do something imaginative, the first dungeon we came across failed spectacularly on so many levels. The first dungeon only allows you to bring 3 players, when the game allows for a max party of 5. Glitching environment systems, like a room filling with water so you can reach a bridge, nearly kills players when they can't swim and just remain underwater as it's filling. The general design linearity features no deadly traps or challenging encounters, and bosses that go from being nightmarish to complete pushovers in a matter of 3 levels. The only interesting combat mechanics are made moot by the boss's immunity to combo attacks. Want to grind the dungeon? Sure, after you leave, disband the party, have everyone individually reset the dungeon, reform the party, and then go back in. I have been to the second dungeon, which doesn't reveal itself until level 35, over 15 levels after you come across the first one. And while it is a bit more interesting and does allow for a full party, it comes across as too little too late. I'd honestly not be shocked if I heard that people currently playing this game didn't even know the game had dungeons. That does not mean I have nothing to talk about in the community section, though. I bit my tongue saying this in the side quest, as I gave it the benefit of the doubt that it was just a beta thing, but the community as a whole is incredibly terrible, and with the game's mechanics actually encouraging you to screw over every living thing within your wake, it's not hard to understand why so many people are driven to maddening, rage-fueled quests to just kill everyone. Anyone you see beyond level 30 is a potential enemy, just waiting for you to drop your guard so they can kill you, and with the inept trial system, you can bet the consequences for their actions is minimal. Enemy factions can easily enter your questing area by walking through a portal, and you'll often find endgame level players running through the enemy's lower level contested areas to pick up easy and frequent kills. The game almost encourages it, as you gain the same amount of honor points killing an opposing faction player who's level 30 as you would fighting an even more fair match at level 50. The irony of the term honor points is not lost on me. Your own faction can easily flip a switch and murder you simply because they can, before switching back to safe mode with such rapidity that you'll wonder why there isn't a murderer debuff to prevent this deflagging. Almost everyone is trying to screw everyone else over. The chat was also originally infested with gold spammers, until a new patch shifted the ability to speak until level 15, but that lasted for all of about a day before new spammers hit 15 and started the cycle all over again. You'll also find these spammers sitting in the trial house and even sending you in-game mail talking about how they're the only trustworthy and totally not a scam website available to purchase gold from. It's best to simply ignore the chat for your own sanity and create your own channel that allows your party and guild to speak with you, assuming your guild isn't infested with the same kind of people you're trying to escape the chats from in the first place. The general us versus them mentality was so fervent in the beta stages of the game, it seems to have kind of waned as more and more players turn to killing each other regardless of their patron status, and a general feeling of disappointment seems to be settling into the chat. This rampant hatred has shifted to just calling out specific guilds or players, complete with long-winded rants about how they're the worst thing in existence since Stalin, rather than just complaining about them being subscribers or free players. The worst part of all this is that the game's core mechanics actually encourage this behavior, with the user base getting around the restrictive design by using bot programs to stay logged in forever, to get more labor points, or even just play the game for them. People are actively trying to become pirates to better screw over their former faction mates, and those standing trial for murder and theft tend to scream out racial slurs and derogatory comments to the jury so that they can be given max sentence. Players will often see through this ruse, knowing that they're actually doing this to increase their infamy and actually vote them innocent to reduce their score and screw up their entire plan, as you need to be tried and jailed multiple times before you can even become a pirate. Basically, the community gets around the crap by being crap. Another major issue with this trial system is that the punishments never fit the crime. And I sure as hell don't mean that in the terms that the punishments are being overly severe. It's quite the opposite. I've stood on juries where the offender had killed multiple people, stolen or uprooted several hundred crops, accumulating nearly 300,000 crime points, and the most I could give them was a 13-minute sentence. That's a YouTube video and a bathroom break's worth of punishment. It doesn't discourage anything. Take the example of the open PK systems in Lineage 2 and Age of Wushu, where gaining infamy will automatically force town guards to attack you, and in Wushu's case, getting killed by anything would throw you in jail for several hours, forcing you to remain logged in during the time frame. Here, the player won't even become wanted until they're reported by other players, via inspecting blood splatters or uprooted and stolen crops. Then, with enough reports, any player kill will land them in the trial system, where they have the option of pleading their case to a bunch of people who think uprooted crops are a more serious offense than player killing, or just taking the ridiculous slap-on-the-wrist jail sentences where, if you go in carrying enough spoons, you can just dig your way out in a couple of minutes. The convicted can expunge their records by simply picking up litter from a beach. There is no point to it. I'd reached the point where I just refused to take the justice system with any kind of seriousness. Started reporting blood splatters with phrases like ninjas, ninjas everywhere, and Batman came down and totally shot the dude in the face. I'm kinda hoping I just brought a smile to at least some juror's face. If you want to participate in the jury system anyway, there's a quest you'll obtain in 2 crowns once you reach level 30. Once completed, you're automatically added to the queue, which you can check in the character menu with C. Keep in mind leaving the game, voluntarily or involuntarily, will reset the queue, and you can choose not to participate in a trial when the prompt comes up. One unfortunate truth about this community is that there are quite a few decent people who are willing to lend a hand or even have civil conversations with you while you ride on carriages, but the sheer volume and sea of negativity from faction chats and player kills from both factions quickly drowns them out. You can alleviate a majority of the problems by forming your own guild amongst friends, and the game often encourages it as a way for free players to remotely participate in some of the more sandboxy aspects of the game. So why did the community have such a massive split between free players and patron players? Let's get into that. This game certainly lends itself to a very aggressive interaction between free players and patron players, and while the complete bile fest between both groups has become far less frequent, the divide between the two camps is certainly a steep one, with a few attempts to bridge that gap resulting in utter catastrophe. So if you decide to give money to this game, what sort of things can you expect? The main features of patron status are having a much higher labor point accumulation rate, the ability to gain points while offline as stated previously, a labor point cap increasing from 2,000 to 5,000, the ability to create your own housing and farms, the ability to sell items in the auction house, and a 10% increase in all experience gains. You'll also gain a special icon that denotes you as a patron for anyone who clicks on you. You'll also gain 5 loyalty points with every login while you're a patron that can be used to purchase a few items in their own separate tab. Free players can attempt to close some of these gaps by purchasing special permits to list items for sale, or getting labor points from specialty potions, or even buying Apex, a sellable item that grants cash shop points, allowing them to purchase patron status for free. You may think that the system allows free players to get everything with some extra hard work, but like WildStar's cred, someone has to pay for it so it can even be offered in the first place. Really, patron status offers so many benefits over the free-to-play game that one could easily make the argument that the game is a pay-to-win over a pay-for-convenience. I had purchased a month of patron status after a week of play, just to see the difference, and while playing as a free player, I never saw my labor points get near the 1,000 point mark. As a patron, I hit the cap of 5,000 in less than 3 days, and I had to seriously try to get rid of them. As for the cash shop itself, you'll find your regular assortment of boosters, cosmetic items, bag expansions, lucky boxes, and the like, alongside the curious paintings and shirts system that allows you to put your own custom logo on these specialty items. There are also, unfortunately, items available for purchase like the Lucky Box only obtainable Carrot Donkey that are statistically better than what it's earned through normal means. Should you purchase anything from the cash shop, you'll find it quickly delivered to the Marketplace mail system, which, unlike standard mail, can be accessed anywhere at any time by clicking on the button in the bottom right corner. ArcheAge didn't really hold up to my first impressions. While most of us found it very charming at first, the longer we went on, the less and less of us began to show up back to play. And by the time the script was finished, you could count the number of active Grindstone members on half a hand. While the majority of the community has decided not to keep a presence in this game, our guild still exists, and there are a couple people willing to give it a go. Anyone can hit level 50 if they just keep playing, and with the numerous ways to gain experience, it at least offers a variety in how you want to progress. I'm certain fans are going to just claim this game as hardcore, but don't associate tedium with difficulty. It sure as hell didn't work for WildStar. Here's my final rating. Not since World of Warcraft have I played a game with a world this seamlessly open. It was seriously a refreshing experience to be able to walk down the road and see the next area without having to enter a portal or walk into an obvious loading tunnel. It's amazing taking to the ocean in your clipper and traveling in real time across the treacherous waters and to your destination. approaching continents and questing areas from various angles. Having a game that allows you to play in a sandbox style and a theme park style is nice for those who simply don't want questing to be their only method of advancement, especially if one finds the questing as lackluster as many seem to. Still, offering a choice in gameplay style is an interesting development, even if the chain-style questing ends as you reach level 30. This is really the kind of game that's best suited for a large group of players, all working together, and many to nearly all of the most frustrating aspects of this game can be overcome with a good group of friends, or at least being part of a popular website community. No, I'm not claiming that I have a popular enough website, but let's just say that something like Reddit or Something Awful's Goon Squad could easily take over a server if they banded together. While it's unfortunate most of Grindstone was able to stick with the game, I'm certain that if you find or join a good group of players with your idealism and clear the hurdles, you'll have a good time. The difference between the benefits of a free player versus a paying player is staggering, as the benefits of gaining patron status, increased labor point production, XP gains increase, the ability to list your own auctions, and the option to have your own land and farms for better crafting, gives paying players a serious edge over the others. Even a large guild might have at least 1 or 2 paying members providing items for his guild members and sharing land plots to speed along everyone's growth. However, what's not really being touted as a feature by many publications is that a lot of these features can be outright purchased from the paying players on the auction house, and obtaining a good amount of in-game gold isn't really difficult if you're performing regular trade runs. Through the credit-granting Apex, cash shop items like labor potions, hell, even patron status itself, one could provide themselves with the benefits of a paying player without spending a dime, provided you're willing to invest the time. Just remember that someone is paying for it. This is a really odd way to approach the sandbox genre. Since you can't even access most of the more interesting features of the game until you hit level 30, you'll be jumping through ArcheAge's preordained hoops before you can even access most of the features people would want to be able to use at the start. Becoming a pirate and earning the pirate faction's trust are two completely separate things, and forcing players to perform various tasks of grinding and dickery to become something that sounded appealing from the start of the game comes across as odd, to say the least. Some mechanics, especially in crafting, come across as seriously convoluted, requiring several more steps than necessary for things that you wouldn't think should be that difficult. Having to grind simple, weaker items just to learn the ability to craft in bulk is a chore. Uploading a custom image by entering it into the game's file to a specific folder, using a very specific file name and size, then having to purchase a cash shop item, find a printer in-game, choose a custom crest, craft a stamp, then buy a memory ink, use the stamp, and stamp each individual crest on each individual item that can be stamped using up 1 memory ink each time, seems a lot more needlessly convoluted than Warframe's process of simply uploading an image to your account page. It's these weird, frustrating, nonsensical tasks that provide more frustration than they do challenge or enjoyment. While the patron elitism has mostly subsided from the beta days, the divide between the paying and free players is absurdly massive, and getting patron status is almost mandatory for anyone who wants to really enjoy this game as more than just a simple theme park grinder. As Drusker said it a while back, it's not so much pay to win as it is pay to do anything fun. Finally, even before the beta was finished, articles about how toxic the community was were popping up everywhere, and while I gave them the benefit of the doubt, nothing really changed too much. While the chat restrictions of a recent patch definitely slowed the poor behavior of the chat channels, which of course are easily avoided just by simply not reading them, this kind of behavior does carry over into the game. Having to be more concerned of the actions of your own faction rather than the actions of the enemy faction is a serious detriment in a faction-based PvP game. And the game's oddly forgiving of this, and occasionally rewards this kind of behavior, like granting the same amount of honor points for headhunting level 30 players at level 50. This game is a griefer's paradise. If you plan on going into ArcheAge at all, don't bother going in alone. Now, while I await the inevitable shitstorm of comments from this game's player base, let's check in with that Halloween poll and see what I'm going to be looking at. Looks like the next episode, as voted by you, will be Fear Online. Really thought ZMR was going to take that. Well, see you on Halloween.
Alright.
Whoa! Fuck! Ah! Oh, I didn't do shit.
Is it for the best that I'm not there?
See? I told you I can do it.